This video have explained what is an entity, what is an attribute, various kinds of attributes along with null value. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this video link with your friends, gain the knowledge and rule the world. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, write the comments, gain the knowledge and rule the world. Share this video link with your friends. Entity, the basic object that the ER model represents is an entity. The basic object that the ER model represents is an entity. ER model is nothing but entity relation model, and the basic thing which is used for the purpose of representing ER model is entity. Entity is a thing which is present in the real world with an independent existence. An entity may be an object with an physical existence such as person, a car, an employee, a house, or it may be an object with an conceptual existence. That means it might be a company, a job, or a university course. That means which is an imaginary, or it can be having an physical existence. Physical existence means which we can see as well as we can touch, whereas conceptual thing means which we imagine, which we can imagine. Those are the conceptual existence. The basic object that is represented in an ER model is entity, which is a thing in the real world with an independent existence. Attribute, each entity has attributes. Attributes in the sense which is going to describe the particular properties of an entity. Which is going to describe the particular properties of an entity is called as an attribute. For example, employee is an entity, and employee entity may be described by name, age, address, salary and job of an employee, and each of the entity will be having a value for each of these attributes. It means a name, it will also have a value, salary, it will also have a value, age, it will also have a value. That means each of the attribute will be having a value, and these values will describe each entity, becomes a major part of a data stored in a database. The combination of all these values for a single entity will be stored in a database, and it is a major part. It plays a very important role in a database. In figure A, two entities, an employee E1, a company C1 is there with their attributes. Employee E1 consisting of attribute name, address, age, home phone with the values Arjun B 007 Gandhinagar, Hospet, Karnataka 583201, 35 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 0 as the values of an attributes name, address, age, home phone respectively. Another one entity is a company C1 which has three attributes name, headquarters, president. Name is an attribute which is having a value Indian Oil. Headquarters is an attribute which is having a value Hospet. President is an attribute which is having a value John Smith. So these are the three attributes name, headquarters and president of an entity company C1. In this diagram we have two entities E1 and C1. E1 is an employee entity, C1 is a company entity with their attribute and values for the attribute. This is the details of an employee E1 and the company C1 entities along with their attributes. Different types of attributes that occur in an ER model are simple attribute, composite attribute, single valued attribute, multi-valued attribute, stored attribute and derived attribute. These are the various kinds of attributes. First one, simple and composite attributes. Among that, the first one, simple. The simple attribute is also called as an atomic attribute. The attributes that are not divisible are called simple or atomic attributes. The attributes which are not divisible are called simple or atomic attributes. Example, F name, that means first name, L name, last name, middle initial, age. These are what? The attributes which cannot be divisible or which cannot be divided. F name in the sense first name, for example John. Another one example for first name might be Ralph, R-A-L-F. Another example might be Arjun. So these are the names, that is the attribute values which we have given. Those are not divisible. Arjun, it is not divisible. John, it is not divisible. Those kind of attributes are called simple or atomic attributes. Next one is composite attributes. The attributes which can be divided into smaller subparts which represent more basic attributes with independent meaning. Those are called as a composite attributes. Means the attributes which can be divided into smaller subparts, and each of the subpart will be representing an meaningful information or an independent meaning. Those are called as an composite attributes. An example might be address. The address attribute of an employee entity, as shown in this below figure, you can see it can be subdivided into street address, city, state and zip. Zip in the sense pin code. So here we can give the values as for the street address 007 Gandhinagar, city as Hospet, state Karnataka and zip as 583201. The composite attributes will be consisting of the attributes. That means the attributes can be further divided into smaller subparts. Those are called as an composite attributes. These subparts will be having an independent meaning, and these subparts can be again divided into subparts. It is called as an hierarchy of composite attributes. For example, the street address can be again divided into number, street, apartment number. For example, here the street address I am going to divide them as 007, that is the apartment number, and Gandhinagar as a street name. This is the information regarding simple attribute and composite attribute. Simple means the attributes that are not divisible. Composite attribute means which can be divisible. That means which can be divided into smaller subparts such that each of the subpart will be having an independent meaning. The value of an composite attribute is the concatenation of the values of its constituent simple attributes. For example, address. Address is a composite attribute. The value for that one will be 007 Gandhinagar, Hospet, Karnataka 583201. This is the value for an composite attribute address. That means how it is formed? It is formed by the concatenation of all the values of a simple attribute, which is it is consisting of valued and multi-valued attributes. An attribute which can have a single value for a particular entity, those are called as a single valued attribute. Most of the attributes will be having a single value, and those kinds of attributes are called as a single valued. Most of the attributes will be having a single value for a particular entity, and those kinds of attributes are called as a single valued. Means attribute which will be having only one value, those are called as a single valued attributes. Example, age. If anyone asks the age, you will be saying as 16, 18, 19, 20, 21, 24 like that, and you will never say that 18 and 19, 19 and 20. That means it is not will be consisting of two values, it will be consisting of only one value. So that is an attribute which is having only one value is called as an single valued attribute. Similar example might be register number. Each of the student will be having only one register number. So it is a single valued attribute. In some cases, an attribute can have a set of values for the same entity. That means for each single attribute, it will be having more than one values. Those kinds of attributes are called as an multi-valued attributes. Examples are the colors attribute for a color, or the college degree attribute for a person. Cars with one color have a single value, whereas two-tone cars will be having a two values for colors, and if it is consisting of three colors, then it will be having a three values for the car's color value. Similarly, if a person may not have a college degree, or a person may have one degree, or a person may have 2 degrees or more than 2 degrees. In those cases, a person with no degree will be not having a value, whereas a person with 1 degree will be having a 1 value. A person with 2 degree will be having a 2 values. A person with 3 degrees will be having a 3 values. That means these kinds of attributes will be having different number of values or a multiple number of values, and those kinds of attributes are called as an multi-valued attribute. And the multi-valued attribute may have lower bound as well as the upper bound on number of values allowed for each individual entity. For example, the colors attribute of a color may have between 1 and 3 values if we assume that a car can have at most 3 colors. That is, the lower bound will be 1 value, upper bound will be 3 values, because we are considering that the car can have at most 3 colors. That means not more than 3 colors. That means it will be not having more than 3 values. And the lower bound will be 1 color, that is a 1 value, and an upper bound will be 3 colors, that is a 3 values. An attribute which has a single value is called as a single valued attribute. An attribute which have multiple values are called as a multi-valued attribute. Kind of attribute is stored attribute and derived attribute. In some cases, 2 or more attributes will be related. For example, the age and date of birth attributes of a person. For a particular person entity, the value of an age can be determined from the current date and the value of the person's date of birth. Means if you know the person's date of birth, we can calculate the age of the person by using today's date. That means the age attribute, whatever is there, it is the derived attribute because it is obtained by using an attribute called date of birth, and date of birth attribute is called as a stored attribute. The age attribute is called as a derived attribute because we get the value of an age by using the date of birth attribute along with the today's date, and date of birth attribute is called as a stored attribute. Some attribute values can also be derived from unrelated entities. For example, to know the number of employees working in a department entity can be derived by counting the number of employees who are working for that particular department. For example, to know the number of employees working for a computer science department, so when we count the number of employees who are present for now, who have been working for a computer science department, if you count, then you will come to know the number of employees who are working for a computer science department. So this is regarding an stored attribute and derived attribute. Null values. In some cases, a particular entity may not have an applicable value for an attribute. For example, the apartment number attribute of an address applies only to an address that are in the apartment buildings and not for any other type of buildings such as a single residence buildings. Similarly, a college degree attribute applies only to a person with a college degree. For such situations, we can give a special value, and that special value is called as a null. An address of a single family will be having a null value for an apartment number, and a person with no college degree, it means a person who will be not having an degree will be having a null value for a college degree. The null value can also be used if we do not know the value of an attribute for a particular entity. For example, if we do not know the home phone number of Sachin Tendulkar, in that case what we can give? We can give a null value for the home phone number of an Sachin Tendulkar. The meaning of an former type of null is not applicable. The meaning of the former type of a null is not applicable. That means in case of an apartment number for a single family, in that one the null means it is not applicable, whereas the meaning of an lateral one is unknown. The unknown category of null can be again further subdivided into two cases. The first case arises when it is known the attribute value exists but it is missing. For example, the height attribute of a person. Every person will be having an height, but since we don't know the value of the height of a person, in that case we will be giving the value as a null. And the second case arises when it is not known whether the attribute value exists. For example, the home phone attribute for a person. Right. So these are the two cases where the null can be null values can be given, and it is for an unknown. That means for unknown we will be giving a null value. But again in that one, two cases. One is the value exists but we don't know, and second one is we don't know the value. The second one is we don't know the value. That means it depends whether the value exists or no, that we don't know. But whereas in the first case the value exists but it is not known for us. So these are the two categories in which we can give a null values. And another one category where we can give the null values is when it is not applicable. When it is not applicable, we can give a null value, and when it is unknown. In the unknown we have two categories: when the value exists but we don't know, and the second one is the value is not known. That means the value may or may not exist, that only we don't know. So those cases we can give the value of an attribute as null. These are the categories where we can give null values for an attribute. Complex attributes. Notice that the composite and multivalued attributes can be nested in an arbitrary way, and that nested in an arbitrary way is called as a complex attribute. That means a complex attribute will be consisting of composite attribute and multivalued attribute. As you know, a composite attribute is nothing but an attribute which can be again further subdivided into simple attributes. And multivalued attribute means an attribute which will be having more than one value. A complex attribute is the combination of composite and multivalued attribute which can be nested. How this arbitrary nesting will be done? This arbitrary nesting will be done by grouping components of composite attribute between the parentheses, that is by using a small brackets, and separating the components with commas, and by displaying multi-valued attributes between the braces, that is by using a floor brackets. Within the floor brackets we will be representing multi-valued attribute. Within the small brackets we will be representing a composite attributes. These kinds of attributes is called as an complex attributes. These kinds of attributes are called as an complex attributes, and complex attributes will be consisting of composite and multi-valued attribute which will be nested in an arbitrary way. For example, a person can have more than one residence, and each residence can have multiple phones. A person can have more than one residence and each residence can have multiple phones. The attribute address phone for an person entity can be specified as represented in this particular diagram. Within the flower bracket, address phone, and again within the small bracket, again we have opened the flower bracket, phone, again within the small bracket, area code, comma phone number, close the small bracket, again close the flower bracket, comma address. In that one, again street address, in street address again number, comma street, comma apartment number, close that parenthesis, comma city, comma state, comma zip, close the bracket, again close the bracket, close the flowering brace. Means each of the multi-valued attributes will be represented between the flower brackets, and composite attributes has been represented within the small brackets. Here the composite attribute is address. In that address we can have street address, city, state, zip, and in that street address again it is composition of number, street, apartment number. That means when we have a composite, those will be represented within the small brackets, and multiple will be represented within the flower brackets. Example, address phone, phone and address, which are having more than one value. That means for each address it will be having a phone, and each of the address can be, that means it can have a number of residents. So in those cases we will be using the flower brackets. So it is an example of an complex attributes. In this video I have explained what is an entity, what is an attribute, various kinds of attributes along with the null value. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, gain the knowledge and rule the world.